I'll introduce our next featured poet, John Bolland. John Bolland managed parallel careers in writing and in the offshore oil and gas industry for almost 35 years. Scientifically trained but instinctively an artist, John writes novels, poetry, and short fiction in Scots and English. He was a regional organizer for Extinction Rebellion and is currently active in the Northeast Scotland Climate Action Network. His poetry and short fiction has been widely published, and his first collection, Fallen Stock, was published by Red Squirrel Press in 2019. The companion collection to the Pibroch performance was published by Red Squirrel in 2021. He's a director of the Scottish Writers' Centre, chair of the Huntly Climate Action, and a trustee of the D and Dun Kelit Collective. Again, I hope I pronounce it correctly. And of course, I also have a little reflection on your work, John. And in one of the first poems I read, there was this line, but the stars are coming out, which only means the stars are coming out, from your poem Loch Kulach. And that immediately reminded me of Alberto Cairo, who wrote things like the only mystery is there being someone who thinks about mystery, and also has a line in metaphysics. What metaphysics do those trees have? And in your poems, I also see this kind of down to earthness, but also an eye for the truth that lingers behind all forms. These are poems of life, of hard and weather beaten life, of resilient life that stares down its struggles and faces them head on. And one of the poems where I saw that, for instance, was the wonderful claustrophobic poem Thin Ice that I enjoyed very much. And of course, I have the same question for you as I asked Mandy. The quote by Anne Sexton about her secret instructions. We would love to hear what secret instructions infuse your poetry.
I think you may well have, excuse me, I think you may well have stolen my thunder, Mila.
No, no, no.
Again, thank you for a marvelous introduction. But yes, um, one of the poems in the collection, I think you may have read So Much for the Stag. We were kind of mentored by Mark Simmons, who commented that the important thing about poetry is to be bold about it. As he put it, you know, flash your poetic license and wade in there. And I have some problems about that. I think it's absolutely the freedom that we have as people writing poetry. But at the same time, my second rule in terms of that, or its complement, is don't exaggerate. You know, I think, as with Mandy's poetry, there needs to be a deep rootedness in the rock, to take Loch Kulag, which is also an accent, in case you weren't clear. You know, it needs to be in contact with the substance of its content, and it needs not to have too much me in it and too much exaggerated emotion. Having said that, the poems I'm going to read are quite political and probably quite angry. But that's the second part of the rule. You know, be brave about your poetic license, but don't tell fibs, don't tell lies. And I think those two things kind of go together for me.
Well, wonderfully put. And I'm very much looking forward to those brave and political poems. So please.
Thank you. A little bit of context. Oops, I think I've done something terrible. This is the new collection, Pibroch, which was edited by Elizabeth Rimmer, who I know is here tonight. What I was interested in exploring was parallels between the climate emergency and an offshore oil disaster in 1988 on a platform called Piper Alpha in the northern North Sea, where a number of silly mistakes and some heinous business decisions resulted in 167 men dying in a single incident within about 2 hours of each other. So the collection interplays or interleaves the details of that with the much wider catastrophic situation we find ourselves in now. And I guess, summarizing in a sense, the question is, how do you respond when you find yourself on a burning platform with only limited options, which I think is the big moral question, ethical question at least. So the first poem begins in that place. It's called You Watch the News, and it starts with a quote from the Cullen Report, which is the disaster inquiry into Piper Alpha. There was a large volume of evidence which indicated that the initial explosion occurred at or within 1 or 2 minutes of 2200 hours BST. Some half dozen witnesses on the platform were listening to radio or television, some having just tuned in for the news or sports programs. Some heard the 10 o'clock time signal, others did not. None claimed to have heard more than the very start of the news program. Cullen Report, section 5.14. You watch the news. It's what we do. Tune in, the water's on the boil, and all across this broadcast world, we draw in power and generators kick, in hum, air starters bark, and flames ignite, a whoosh of blue about the kettle's base. But this one day will not remain available upon demand. No single day of living, loving, burning, breathing life is ever so recorded. What's on? What's up? Prayer desk is over and the weather forecast fine. And now the news, which does not mention PSV 504, permit 23434, the 15 tons of methane in the pipe. This, after all, is business as usual. New shift, same shit, like the blasts on the Brent the night before, the blasts on the Vaux on Sunday. Little flashes, little bangs out there in the oceanic silence as the sun at this moment, 22:01, sets just for you. Thank you. I'm going to be patchier than Mandy. Mandy can do the game of two halves and I'll do the quilt. So the second poem I'm going to read is called Philanthropy, trying to stitch things together. Hijacked at 30,000 feet, the milk of human kindness is redirected to a remote spaceport in the Iberian desert. Feckless goodwill thought this trip would take them to the beach, or maybe a bit of culture, but no, all sand, no sea, some tech. The obsolete airliner waits on an isolated runway as the desperate philanthropists negotiate their terms: amnesty, more tax relief, a getaway rocket. It's only a matter of time before the passengers, hot and hungry, storm the cockpit and overpower the villains. Yes, there are casualties, but the passengers outnumber the terrorists by 99-1. Remember that. Thank you. And one of the things I think which is, it's most difficult because we're all of us in the North certainly, are fairly complicit in the mess we've got ourselves into. And one of the key things I think that we need to confront in that is the grief of letting go. So this came as a poem that seems to me connects with that, and it's called Letting Go. You hesitate, sit in her armchair, pondering whether this can wait. Another glass, another day, as the old ones moulder in their lair. Best get it over with. You start with photographs and china ornaments, cut glass swans you always loathed and loved. From each, you wipe off memories until the rag is saturated with regret. Steal time deciding what goes in the bin bag, what is set aside, still grasped too tight, though you know you cannot live with it. Never wanted to, really. Memory has no carbon footprint after all. That done, you pour another glass. The closets. Dead mink coat she never wore, holes in the soles of his old shoes. Bottles, of course, empty as denial. Her underwear, slam shut that drawer. Later, fabrics, laundry, crisp creased tablecloths she never used. The empty bottles are the easy part. No harm in one more then. Mothballs spill on the rug like naphtha-flavoured pan drops, mummified. You laugh, resist the urge to taste. The furniture sags beneath black bin bags crammed with brogues and pantsuits on their hangers, decades to be carted off in a pretense of charity. Once upon a time, they'd need these things, grave goods. They'd wait composed amidst the useless stuff, and you would have visited cobblers, laundromats, refilled at least some of the bottles before you sealed the place with blocks and curses. Why not? You know their ways have no place here. Their time is now a tomb. You cannot own this and survive. Press the cartouche into the lock. Brick up all the windows. And I can't remember how far on I am for. And this poem testimony takes us back again to the Piper incident, and I was very struck about the distinction between the language in the register of things like the Cullen report, the actual inquiries, and the face-to-face testimony of those who survived that night. Testimony. In your telling, when you tell, you're always climbing, jumping, swimming, folding the flashing scraps of raw remembering, trying to pin an ember back into the burning night, yawing and slipping on this melting thing that's always happening, this thing happening, groaning through dreaming, sweating, cold, amazing that your darling sleeps, oblivious to the distance that you're falling, arriving, sinking, drowning, surviving, floating on the promise of a wedding, recalling a loving, laughing woman waiting, hoping, ninja-like, still clinging to the searing steel or clawing at the rocking rib, energized by terrifying noise, surviving again and again, surviving again, then walking, crying, living, not dying, scarring, healing into binging, lost weekends, lost moments, gin, relieving, grieving, not missing, forgetting, then bingo, glimpsing someone, gesturing just so, though you've seen him disappear into the roaring, everything flooding back, paralyzing, realizing you were memorizing every choking, gasping, scorching moment, while turning, thinking, deciding, praying, helping, always pushing, shoving, climbing, jumping, swimming, living, crying, in your telling. So I thought we better cheer things up with a little bit of hope, because it was, and this is the last poem in the book, although I'll read one more short one after this. And this is called In Time. First, we let us in. It seems so obvious, though unpredictable in consequence, for who are we, who us? And then we ripped out all the fence lines, toppled dikes. We had to make fast travel a taboo as stirks wandered the highways. Hogs agreed a wary truce, bracken suffered, nettles throve in comfrey. Of course, there was some hunger, but it was shared. Shorn ewes grazed amongst the salad greens. Electricity was taken when available. Conversation flourished and fructated, debating what to read and whether not to. Luthiers and poets, healers, dowsers, foresters and engineers were all the rage. Everyone grew something. There were no call centers. No one waited on the next available nothing, was insured, assured. We learned to dance, forgave their debts and accepted obligations offered more or less, were kind as barren cities emptied, burned deeds and contracts every jubilee until no slaves remained. Infants decided not to be born. Elders withdrew. Kith proliferated. We were less many. We, us, became a favoured pronoun. There, they, withered in the heat. Then there were no surpluses, only trees and seasons. We travelled in increments, traded kilograms, not tons, foraged in gardens, worked with the forest, the river, the sea. We welcomed the rain and we were not distracted. We chose to listen, not to fly. Knowledge was common knowledge and ingenuity was effervescent. Eventually, we let the earth forget us. Our fossils rare as hen's teeth above the thin black line we traced in time, but cut in time. Thank you. And final short poem, because, you know, it's always fascinating, I think, when one has a collection like this, you try and find what you think the thing's about, and you keep moving from poem to poem, saying, oh, it's that one, it's that one, it's that one, when, you know, thanks to the support people like Elizabeth, you realise it's the whole thing. This is called Teach Your Child to Swim. Teach your child to swim. Though those skills might seem implausible in a desiccated landscape whose only river, glacier fed, is full of crocodiles. Teach your child to swim, though the family lore insists it only prolongs the agony. The cold will kill you anyway. Teach your child to swim, though you live in pleasant suburbs in London, Dallas, Barcelona, or LA, for fire and flood is coming. Sooner or later, our children will confront the river Styx and find the ferries cancelled and the coasts patrolled. Teach your child to swim. Thank you very much. Thank you. And thank you, Mila, for having me speak, and Stephanie.